She's Maya May.
Oh, and that's Lisa Senecal, I think that way. And We're Speaking, which is right here, starts now.
May.
Hey, we're here. We're here and we're solving problems. I don't know if you've seen us tweeting about it like crazy today, but it's the wondrous and fantastical fine art of problem solving, real talk. Tonight's guest, Amy Herman, made me want to go to a museum. Lisa, I don't know if you know this about me, but I get sleepy in museums. But
usually have really comfortable benches for you to be able to lie down on and nap. So
yeah, and that's exactly it. I get tired, but apparently you can use art to shift perspectives and it helps with problem solving. We've got a lot of problems, not just me personally, the world. We have problems. And so now I'm wide awake because we're going to get to the bottom of this and we're going to solve all of the world's problems by the end of this show.
Yeah, Maya and I are fired up today to talk with Amy Herman. Yeah, I don't personally have any problems. We've talked about this before on the show. Like, I'm fine. But America has one or two little bugaboos going on right now, like, democracy teetering on the very edge. But one of the things Amy says is that we need to look at problems as opportunities. So we're going to try to do that. And it means that America is still the land of opportunity. We are the land of opportunity because we have so many problems. This is great. It's a time of growth. That's the way we have to look at it. Because I do feel like America has a problem-solving problem. Critical thinking, not necessarily our strong suit right now, but we used to be good at this stuff, like innovation, creation, like that was the thing. And now we just yell at each other through screens, across tables, slap each other at award shows. It's a little insane. And I'm like, part of it is perhaps our complacency, and we don't want America to be Blockbuster is what I'm saying. Like, we don't want to get complacent. We need to come off autopilot and focus, because if we getting better than we are.
Yes.
But we're not there yet. And as our weekly example of just how not there we are, let's take a look at the latest edition of Last Week in the Republican Party.
Wheel of Fortune? Ding, 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 ding.
Oh, hey, we're going to have kind of a sexual get-together at one of our homes. You should come. And I'm like, what did you just ask me to come to? Yeah. And then you realize they're asking you to come to an orgy.
And I am going to burn in hell.
Apparently, I'm a woman.
Satan is so smart. He's like a Death Eater from Harry Potter. I say just ban all gay people.
Is this a Dominion voting machine? It's a Dominion voting machine. What's this thing doing here?
I mean, when I found out, does anyone know who employed Darwin? Where Darwin comes from?
It's true. They weren't here for him. They were here for me. And he said, I don't think so, sir.
And I think we should recognize that the jackassery we often see around here is partly because of people mugging for short-term camera opportunities.
Property of godless commies. You ain't from around here. Oh, what's this? What's this say? Don't believe the gospel of Jesus? Okay, all right, come on.
Working in Washington is like the worst job in the world. I never want to go that close to the Mason-Dixon line in my entire life.
The ocean will rise 1/100% over the next 300 years.
And I'm going to nominate Donald Trump for Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
I don't care about the eastern border of Ukraine. I don't. I just don't.
You can ask her about the weather. She's going to take it right back to our stolen election.
But women shouldn't even wear pants.
Boom! That's it, baby!
Just got the horn with the Constitution.
Was that a scene from Office Space, like at the end where they like bash the printer in? Like, wow, we have 99 problems, and I think they were all in that video.
It is a weekly race to the bottom and to extreme idiocy. It's really incredible that the competitive nature of trying to out stupid each other, but that's one of the problems that we have. That is the way the Republican Party is functioning right now, and it's a problem.
Yeah, the function is dysfunction, and we are committed, no matter what is going on in the external world, to work through these problems. So incredibly excited to bring our guest tonight. Her latest book is Fixed: How to Perfect the Fine Art of Problem Solving. She's an expert in visual intelligence, and her TED Talk has nearly 850,000 views. And she teaches the best of the best. Like, she's like the top gun developer of problem solving curriculum. Please bring in, yes, here she is, Amy Herman. I want to be like, Amy Herman!
Music. Dun, dun.
Here I am.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. But watching that video with you, you know what came to mind? Did you ever hear the line, "You can't fix stupid"? Did you ever hear that?
I have.
You can't fix stupid, but here's my retort. You can make it less stupid.
I like this.
That's encouraging.
That is. It's like baby stepping our way to back to normal.
It's all about baby steps.
We can do this. And so you're an observer. You're an art educator. It's not an obvious connection. How did you go? Like, how did you go from being like the head of education at the Frick Collection to like training Secret Service agents? Like, how did that happen?
Well, the other secret that I don't let out very often is I'm also a recovering lawyer. Don't tell anybody. Okay, I'm also a lawyer. But I hated practicing law. And, you know, knowing what you want to do is just as important, or knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as knowing what you want to do. So when I hated practicing law and I loved art history, I said, let's take the practical aspects of each of these, legal analysis and visual analysis, and combine it into something that's useful, that's innovative, and it's going to solve problems that nobody is solving right now. And, you know, it sounds easy to say. It took me years to get here, but it ain't rocket science what I'm doing. And that's what I love about it.
Well, reading your book, it feels a bit like rocket science, but you do break it down in ways that make it accessible, and feels like we might be able to get there. You just mentioned you held on to the visual piece. You talk a lot about visual intelligence.
Yes.
What role do you think social media, our rapid rate of media consumption, and what the landscape overall is like, that you know, those floodgates having opened and coming at us, how does that impact our visual intelligence?
Here's the bottom line. My definition of visual intelligence is seeing what matters. We are barraged 24/7, social media, 24/7 news cycles. I mean, just watching your video, I was getting a headache. I'm like, this is what we see all the time. And what you have to do is you have to parse that information out, and you need to see what matters to you, what matters to making a better world, and how you can engage and use the information that's available to you. Our brains can't process everything that's available to us. We would just, you know, everything would overflow. So visual intelligence teaches you how to filter out only the information that you need, because there's just too much out there. And so, yeah, social media plays a huge role in it, but there's a lot of value in social media. So I want to give people the tools to draw out what they need to solve the problems that they're facing, personally, professionally, individually, collectively. And there really is a way to do it. And, you know, much to my amazement, the answer lies in art. And I'm going to give you just the line that I use is finding common ground. And the example, when we talk, look, everything's broken, right? Just watch the video you just put up. Everything's broken. But Ginsberg and Scalia, what was their common ground? Opera, art. They were friends. They went to the opera together. It doesn't mean that it affected their decisions, but they met each other where they are around art. And I believe we can just take it out bigger.
So, and that's to me what is so fascinating about your book, because, you know, I was saying earlier, art isn't something that necessarily is something that attracts me, but what is it about the process of looking at art that helps us solve problems?
The phrase that I used before, common ground. When I take the Secret Service or the Navy SEALs or homicide detectives through an art museum, I'm assuming no one has any knowledge about what we're looking at. And so none of it is threatening. You know, all this power play in Congress is everybody's threatening to everybody else. But when we're looking at art together, what's threatening about looking at a painting? Nothing. Mm-hmm. And so when you have two cops standing in front of a painting and I say, look at it for 10 seconds and each of you tell me what you see, when they give me entirely different versions of what they're looking at, that's fine in the art museum, but what's happening at the crime scene? What's happening in the boardroom? What's happening in the conference room, in the operating room? So we have to start with this idea that looking at art gives us common ground to realize that no two people see anything the same way.
And there were two portraits, and we're the Lincoln Project. So the first portrait, here we go, of Abraham Lincoln. And then you ask the reader to engage with that. And then after that, then there's another image, a portrait. And so of Obama, and then we have to engage in that. Can you talk about that process in kind of, because that to me was like such a fascinating piece, because it really did hit me in the way that you describe in the book.
Sure. You know what it comes down to? I'm going to start backwards. It all comes down to skin in the game. Okay. When I put up a picture of Lincoln, we all know who Abraham Lincoln is. Reverence, Civil War, you know, just the 16th president of the United States. Everybody knows, recognizes, and has reverence for Lincoln in the role that he played in American history. I take down that portrait of Lincoln and I put up the portrait of Barack Obama by Kehinde Wiley. And everyone's body language changes. Some people smile, some people cross their legs, some people frown. And here's the bottom line. I don't care whether you like Obama, you hate Obama, or you are indifferent to Barack Obama. You had skin in the game when he was the president. His administration affected your life. You're not old enough to have lived during Lincoln's administration. And if you were, I want to know what you're eating for breakfast, because nobody in my room was alive when Lincoln was the president. And looking at him, there's a certain distance. But when you have skin in the game, emotion comes up. And that's what bias is. And if I were to put Barack Obama next to Abraham Lincoln, how you feel about Barack Obama is going to affect how you look at Lincoln. And that's what bias is. A personal experience affects how you view everything else. And people, this light bulb goes on over their heads. They're like, oh, I get it. Everyone talks about bias. It's when you have skin in the game and it clouds your lenses for everything else that you look at. And looking at that portrait of Obama, you could just look at the room and see how people feel and how palpable it is. And none of that happens when they look at Abraham Lincoln. Skin in the game affects how we look at things.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Yeah, it is crazy. I'm going to veer off in a weird direction for a minute, but bear with me. Okay. So we're going to take it from the elevated world of museums, and I want to talk pop culture for just a minute. So I'm watching Bridgerton. And one of the things that I find really fascinating about that show is that race has been removed. Mm-hmm. And you talk in the book about being able to relate differently to people after we have had experiences with them. Do you think that watching things like a movie, like Hamilton, where races were used, where races
colorblind casting, basically. Yeah.
So how does that socially change us? Because we're not all going to be able to have those direct experiences with people who are very different than we are, but we can see them.
We can. But I'm going to start with something that sounds more negative than it is. We can never stand in somebody else's shoes because we are who we are. I am a white, middle-aged woman who lives in New York City. There's nothing I can do about that. That's who I am. But it doesn't mean that I can't meet other people where they are, hear what they have to say, acknowledge and validate their experiences, even though they might be counter to mine. And when you say to someone, you know, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to meet you where you are because I want to hear what you see. And I'm putting see in quotes. I want the respect in return. I want you to hear where I am coming from. And you know something, I have to throw this in there. I got a letter from a senator after I wrote my first book, and I didn't recognize his name. And I opened the letter and I realized he was a senator from the other side of the aisle. And he invited me to breakfast. He said, I have 10 questions about your book. And my son said, Mom, you can't go. He's on the other side. And I said, you do not turn down an invitation from a senator to have breakfast who wants to talk about your book. Do you know, we are still friends. We have breakfast every couple of months. We have nothing in common. We are from states as far apart, but art gives us common ground. And when I write about him in this other book, because we agree about nothing, but we can talk about issues on common ground. And the way he votes, it's not how I would vote, but it doesn't mean that we can't default to our humanity and find another way to look at issues.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Default to our humanity. May that be our actual default. Wow. That is.
We don't do that very much these days.
No, that is heavy. And that brings me to a question about empathy, because in your book, you talk about how art almost creates that level of empathy. Can you talk about what role empathy plays in problem solving?
Absolutely. You know, when you have people look at art, as I said before, you're all at ground zero, and you're less likely to jump on somebody if you're at the exit ramp of your comfort zone. You know, when you are hot in the debate, I mean, you looked at these hearings for Judge Jackson, and it was just, you were cringing because people were in their zone and they were on national television. But when you take people out of the limelight and you put them in front of works of art where nothing is threatening, they're at the exit ramp of their comfort zone, there's going to be a level of empathy. There's going to be a level, it's just going to take it down a notch because everybody's at the same place. And so by removing people from their everyday circumstances, having them look at works of art together and talk about, this is not some touchy-feely thing. This goes directly to the skills they need for their jobs. And I say, tell me what you see. Don't tell me if you like it. Don't tell me if you don't like it. And then I want you to empathize with somebody who sees this work of art differently than you do. And somehow it brings our biases and our assumptions just to the front lines, and we see them in a light that we're not willing to do when we're on the job. So it's a matter of stepping away to really appreciate how other people, to stand in other people's shoes and see how they see. And for some reason, much to my amazement, art gives us the vehicle to do that.
That light, don't tell me what you like and don't like, was another really interesting thing that you talked about in your book, that you can't stop there. When someone asks you how you feel about a piece of art, it's not enough to say, I like it, I don't like it. You encourage us all to follow up with the question, why? Both asking that of ourselves and other people. Why is that so important?
Right. My mother told me, I was 5 years old, and I said, somebody asked me a really embarrassing question, and she said, always answer a question with a question. And so when someone asks you a difficult or a hard or an embarrassing or a sexist question, you say to them, why would you ask me a question like that? You know, come back at them with a question. And so the idea is, don't shut the dialogue down by saying, well, I don't know, or I hate that painting. You're going to go nowhere fast, and nobody's going to solve a problem. So my idea is, keep the dialogue going. Look what happened today. Susan Collins is going to support Judge Jackson. Susan Collins is going to support Judge Jackson. Why? Because she brought her to her office and they had a dialogue and they were able to talk about the issues that matter. And Susan Collins said, you know what? In our conversation, she said what I want to hear, and I'm going to give her my support. They did not shut the door and say, you know what? I'm a Republican. I'm not going there. They fixed that problem. If it was a problem to begin with, they fixed the problem by keeping the lines of communication open. And that's what I'm trying to do. It is the first and most important step to solving a problem, is keep the lines of communication open. And when someone looks at a painting and says, well, I hate it, you know what I say? I don't care. Tell me what you see. And then they have to talk. I love it.
This is like, I'm speechless just even hearing this conversation between all of us. I have to be honest, because you have broken it down in such a way that I think everybody who is listening to this conversation is going to go, oh, how do I keep the door open? How do I keep the conversation going? And that is what we so desperately need right now. And Absolutely. So there was a point where you mentioned that people, when they're looking at art and they're working on maybe a specific problem in your workshop, that you'll hear like almost like an audible, like a sigh or like a gasp, or and that something's happening there. Can you talk about that moment, those epiphanies?
Sure. And I'm going to give you one specific example. There is a line that I use, and of course I give visual examples to back it up. And this is something we all need to take with us, okay? It's one of the biggest takeaways when we're trying to solve problems. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Mm-hmm. Sometimes good has to be good enough. And here's one of my examples. Leonardo da Vinci carried the Mona Lisa around with him everywhere, constantly refining it and painting and erasing and scratching it out. And guess what? Then he died. Get the picture? It's finished. When you die, it's finished. Let it go. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And, you know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't aspire to perfection, but there are times, especially if we are parents, good just has to be good enough. Staunch the bleeding, put the Band-Aid on, and move on and say, you know what? I did the best I could, and that's all I'm going to do. Because if we keep pushing and pushing and pushing for perfection, we're never going to get there. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And I think when it comes to problem solving, sometimes solving a problem is just good enough. And let me move on to something where I can do it better. And, you know, people just want to strive and drive the point home. Let it go. Do the best you can. Recognize your own limitations and those of your colleagues and move on.
That desire for perfection, I think, can also be applied to people when you're trying to talk with them and change hearts and minds. Mm-hmm. And is there a hindrance that's created when you're talking with someone, you have reached a point that they see your point of view? But to embrace that, it means they're not only rejecting what they believed, but they have the community mm-hmm. that believed with them. But the new community is not necessarily always open to those folks who've had a change of heart. So how much damage are we doing by requiring perfection in people? Because we're not.
I agree. But here's what we're striving for. We don't want people to shut down conversations. We don't want people to walk away. And when someone says something that is so incredibly stupid, you can't say, I can't believe he just said that. What good does that do? So my suggestion or my solution is you talk about what you see and your position. You listen to someone else's version, and one of three things will happen. They'll see it your way, you'll see it their way, or you will agree to disagree. But if each of you gives your best version, logical order, without emotion, this is the situation, you will have each articulated a position that maybe will open the door to another conversation. By just saying, well, that's just stupid, I'm not even going to talk about that, where does that get you? Mm-hmm. It doesn't get you anywhere. And so those three scenarios, you'll see it their way, they'll see it your way, or you will agree to disagree, forces each of you to give your most articulate version of what you perceive to be the problem. And might I add, we need to say out loud what we think a problem is, because, you know, this show, we say everything's broken, everything's wrong. Let's go around the table and say exactly what's wrong so we can tailor the solution to solve one problem. Because if we don't do that, everybody's going to be assuming something different, and they're going to go about the solution in a different way. That's why chapter number 1 is define the problem.
I'm so glad that you said that, because it's true. We have this myriad of problems, and you talk about breaking things down into bite-sized chunks. And so I'd love to solve a problem with you. Can we solve a problem together, or at least work through some of these steps? Maybe we can model some of this. So we mentioned SCOTUS. We know we have an issue where, you know, a Supreme Court justice, we're trying to get her confirmed. And then we have another Supreme Court justice,
right,
who is potentially involved with, you know,
questionable ethical issues.
Yes. Yeah. So this represents a complex, just the complexity of the complexiest problems.
Absolutely.
If we're approaching a problem this complex, how do we start? Where do we break it down?
I can tell you where not to start. One of my favorite things to do. It's called the pertinent negative. Don't start with accusations. Don't start by saying we are looking at the epitome of hypocrisy. Can't start that way. Because if you do that, what are you going to do? You're going to shut down the conversation. They're going to say, I don't want to hear what the far left has to say. And you're going to go nowhere fast. Okay. So what we do is we say, you know what? We have a conflict here. We have a blatant conflict here. We have two Supreme Court justices. We have two very different scenarios going on, and let's define them for what they are, and let's separate them, and let's not blur the lines. And if we have one justice who is mired in a conflict of interest, and we might say out loud, well, it's obvious what the conflict of interest is. No, lay out exactly why it's a conflict of interest. Who his wife is, what she engaged in, and show the actual engagement, and not put this overarching, well, hypocrisy that goes nowhere. So if we articulate with specificity, objectivity, and precision, because Judge Jackson and Judge Thomas are two SCOTUS justices at issue right now, it's apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges. One is seeking confirmation on her qualifications, on her impeccable qualifications, and the other one is facing a major conflict of interest. They don't really intertwine. They're just happening concurrently. So let's separate the issues and deal with them. SCOTUS is not one big, here comes my lawyer, my lawyer thing coming out. It's not one big overarching institution. There are 9 individual justices. We have apples and oranges, and let's treat them that way.
That is such good advice for pretty much everything that we deal with. So it's a wonderful place to end the conversation. We do need to not see everything as one giant thing and break it down. And
can I throw one more thing in there?
Yes, please, please.
One line to leave you with, and it's a quote from Henry James. In all of this that we've been talking about, I want you to see. And Henry James said, try to be the person on whom nothing is lost. Try to be the person on whom nothing is lost. Broaden your vision, listen, and speak as if you're trying to see as much as possible that's relevant to the problem at hand. Corny.
Perfection. I'm sorry. I know we were perfection, enemy of the good, but I'm sorry. That was perfection.
Yeah. That
just gonna
was.
Yeah. I was like, thank you. It's like, we have to finish this conversation, but do we really want to? No, I want this to be an ongoing conversation because problems are ongoing. And so I do hope that you will come back and join us sometime.
I would love that. Because everything's broken, right? I would love that. And thank you so much for having me on and letting me bring fixed and just shine a little light on how we can solve problems differently. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
We do too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Wow.
Yeah, that is it's not just incredible, and now I'm kind of speechless too.
Right?
It's so important right now for us to be having the kind of conversations that we just had with her and be coming away with the tools, the kind of tools that she gave us, breaking things down into smaller pieces. I have to put a plug in right here for the union. Because that is this pro-democracy organization that the Lincoln Project is part of, that is all sorts of groups who are all working on that one single pro-democracy issue. It is broken down into all these smaller pieces, and folks who volunteer with the union, you can take a little piece. So go to jointheunion.us and sign up. Whatever skills you have skills that are valuable. So please do go and sign up, and we can all do a little piece and make a huge difference.
Yes. And on top of that, I would love our call to action today to be to reflect on some of the challenges, some of the problems in your life, to take a step back, to have that perspective and kind of analyze and break it down in much the same way that Amy just kind of laid out for us. Yes, because if we put these things into action, they become easier and easier and easier to do. And so, you know, tackle, it could be a small problem. Like right now, I'm trying to review toasters and I'm having difficulty. I've been reviewing toasters for 6 months now. So I'm going to apply this to picking out a toaster, because maybe I don't need the perfect toaster. Maybe I just need the just right toaster.
This is like my way of getting my day started when things are feeling overwhelming, and I make a list, and the first one is like drink coffee. And then I can immediately think, all right, I've already succeeded at one thing that was on my list. And for me, a toaster. Yeah.
Oh, and we did ask you how you resolve some of life's complicated problems, and here are some of your responses.
Love these.
Is that GR Green Eyes 4 said, head on, march forward, right into it. I like that attitude.
Yep. And Judy in music, I talk it over with smart people I trust to listen so we can engage in thought sharing. Oh my God, what a perfect response for today's show.
Yes, thought sharing. I love it. Beck Dawn 17 says, with kindness and empathy, it is the only way. Yes. Like loud and clear, louder for the people in the back. That's how we do it. Kindness and empathy. Truly, that's how we open up our hearts.
Yep. And sometimes this can also be helpful. Our final response was, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that correctly. I apologize. But the answer was whiskey. And it is definitely not a long-term strategy or even something
there's whiskey in here.
Short-term to go too hard into, but every once in a while,
hey,
whiskey can't hurt.
You know, it helps. They say one beer actually opens up our ability to like think and problem solve, because it does de-stress a little bit. So like
red wine's a health food. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I like meditation. That helps me calm things down so that I can think clearly. I love everybody's answers. This has been such a fun show, and I hope we have given y'all some useful information and some thought-provoking stuff, some stuff to think about, some stuff to implement. Check out The Breakdown with Tara Setmeyer and Rick Wilson. They'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Who's their guest? David Cole. Yeah. So check that out, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.